Is Elden Ring too easy? That's a question I know that I've thought about a lot, and I know I've been asked a lot. I've seen it as a discourse online as well. Is Elden Ring too easy? That's a question that on the surface might feel like it's just a yes or a no question, but I think it is actually much more nuanced and has a lot more to it than just a simple yes or no. As a side note, if the audio quality is not as good in this video, it's because I'm getting over about 8 different bugs as well as a massive bout of poison oak that I wasn't able to treat because I was in a different country for 2 weeks where they don't have poison oak. So, recommendation, if you get poison oak, don't immediately leave for a country that doesn't have poison oak. Therefore, they do not have medication to treat poison oak. But I digress. Let's get to the video. I'm Bonfire, and let's tackle the question, is Elden Ring too easy? I think to set the stage, why don't we start with some of the reasons why it might not be too easy of a game, but Elden Ring might be a little bit harder. And I think that comes down to how different Elden Ring is than most other Souls games. While most Souls games feel pretty open in terms of the maps and gameplay, they are a much more linear experience. You kind of progress from point A to point B. Now, there might be lots of different ways to get from point A to point B, but there are certain things you kind of have to do, or the game kind of pushes you in that direction in order to get from point A to point B. With Elden Ring, you pretty much only have the sights of grace in their little golden beams pointing you to the next site of grace. There really isn't a whole lot of direction once you kind of get out of that tutorial area. And I know for a lot of people that can be a pretty big barrier, not knowing where to go, so that inherently makes the game a little bit harder. I have multiple friends that have stopped playing the game purely because they just don't know where to go. On top of that, because there's no hand-holding with where you need to go next, you can basically be at base level and then stumble upon some of the harder bosses or enemies in the game. You can come across some tree spirits, or imagine if you're a brand new player, never played a Souls game before, you walk out of the tutorial area and then somehow wind up going to Radon. Like, yes, that's a ways out of the way, but you can do it if you're just exploring and walking around, and that would be a crazy hard experience. Like all Souls games though, if you start to kind of learn the language of the game, learn how boss mechanics work, learn how hitboxes work and iframes work, which if you don't know what that is, that's basically invulnerability frames from rolling or certain actions in these games that allow you to not take damage. But once you kind of learn that, the game does start to get a bit easier. But until you learn those, this game can feel daunting like most other Souls games. And before we move on to the easiness of Elden Ring, I think something that can be just brutal about this game is boss fights. I know I just talked about how learning the language of this game is super important to kind of taking down the difficulty, but until then, you don't really know how things work. You don't know how bosses move, how they flow, how the flow of combat works. Every single Souls game plays a little differently. I mean, think about playing Bloodborne the same way you would have played like Dark Souls 2. It's very, very different. The same way that you play Sekiro is very, very different than Elden Ring. If all you ever try to do is roll in Sekiro, you're going to have a bad time because that doesn't really work in Sekiro. But once you learn how the blocking mechanic works, it becomes a lot easier and it becomes a lot more fluid and fun. With Elden Ring, bosses are brutal. There's a lot of reused assets, yes, but some of the bosses are genuinely terrifying. I mean, think about Melania. Melania, I still suck at. I mean, in one of my previous videos, you saw me die over and over and over again because I'm just kind of bad at fighting Melania. Melania is brutal, and I forget how the mechanics work. Okay, now let's talk about some of the reasons why people online have said Elden Ring is too easy. And just remember, this is all relative when it comes to what we say easy is. It's going to be different for every person, and which is, again, why I think this discussion is more nuanced than just yes or no. To start off, I think Elden Ring does a better job at kind of explaining how the game works more than any other Souls game. When you go through the tutorial area, if you choose to, there are so many things that just pop up in your face telling you how to play the game. That at a base level is more than a lot of the other games give you. A lot of the other Souls games give you signs on the ground or things that you interact with that show you how to play the game. But in Elden Ring, it just straight up pops up and stops you from playing until you either read it and move on or just spam it. Side note, there are so many things in this game that I didn't know about, and I have another video about that, but it's because I didn't read any of this stuff early on, and wish I had. Another thing Elden Ring does that can potentially make the game easier is variety, is choice, is being able to customize your character not only how you want, but you can basically make yourself completely overpowered if you choose to do so. You also have so many weapons with busted, and I mean completely overpowered weapon skills that can trivialize bosses, that can trivialize encounters, but you might not know about them from the beginning. If you're a melee player, think about the Bloodhound's Fang or the Reduvia. Two very, very good weapons that you can get extremely early on into your playthrough that can carry you through the whole game. They're both very, very powerful, but you might not know about them, but they're weapons you can get to just make the game easier. Also think about how spellcasting works in this game. You can basically kind of scale infinitely with spellcasting. You can stay at range, and with most bosses, this is actually an optimal way to play. There's a lot of bosses that are slow moving and lumbering, and so if you just kind of sit back and just cast and cast and cast, no matter what kind of spellcaster you choose to be, that can make the game a lot easier. Item crafting is also something that is so powerful that I personally overlook it a lot. I'm always someone who forgets that items exist in these types of games, so I'll often play through the game and not use any items, not because I don't want to, but because I just kind of forget about them, and they've never really been something I've been inclined to use. Item crafting is so good though. It allows you to build status effect items, things that you can maybe add scarlet rot or poison to your weapon, or like darts that you can throw at people. Think about all the different jars and perfumes you can use in Elden Ring. It's super powerful. In most other games, you either have a finite amount of items to use, or you have to go purchase more, or you have to go farm for those items painstakingly. But in Elden Ring, you can just craft a lot of the things you want to use. It's awesome. Now stop for a second and just imagine you're playing another Souls-like game and you are feeling overwhelmed because you have enemies all around you, your health is low, you're out of healing items, but you have no choice but to trudge forward or run away backwards where you came from. Well, in Elden Ring, if you're in the open world, you have Torrent. You can just jump on your horse and run away really fast, or jump over them, whatever your heart desires. Like, that's a way that you can make the game easier for yourself. When it comes down to it, though, I think the number one reason I've seen, now correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, obviously, but the number one reason I've seen online why Elden Ring might be too easy is because of Spirit Ashes. They are wildly overpowered. They often can draw the focus of enemies or bosses, and the Mimic Tear. I mean, the Mimic Tear is a copy of yourself, and even though it's been nerfed multiple times, it's still really good. I mean, there's multiple fights I recorded here where I just kind of go and sit and let the Mimic Tear do its thing. I just kind of come in at the end and take all the credit and glory. Spirit Ashes are really good. So I guess let's go back to the initial question that this whole video is about, is Elden Ring too easy? That's a accusation that has been lobbied against this game since it came out. And I think the answer to the question is yes, no, maybe. It just kind of depends on you. It depends on how you choose to play the game. I personally think that's incredible. I love games that kind of give you the freedom to determine how difficult it's going to be. And not just because a boss has more health or hits harder, but because it gives you kind of the freedom to pick and choose what you use. If you're struggling with Elden Ring, you can summon in people, you can use Spirit Ashes, you can level up to, not infinity, but you can level up a ton more than you need to and make the game a bit easier. Or you can do like a level 1, no Spirit Ashes, no summons, no items run, and that can make the game a lot harder. You can impose any sort of rules on yourself that make the game easier or harder. There are talismans and items that make you take more damage. There are talismans and items that make you deal more damage. It's really up to you. And I think that is so good. And I think FromSoft does such a good job with this game, making it approachable, making it hard, but also giving you the freedom to make it easier. So what are all of your thoughts on this? Obviously, this is just one person's opinion, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Is this game too hard? Is this game too easy? Is it just right? Does it give you the perfect amount of flexibility and freedom to choose for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you found this invigorating or interesting, or you just like listening to my Benadryl-infused voice kind of drone on for, I don't know, 11 minutes, be sure to subscribe. I'm always posting new videos. I'm posting tips and tricks and many other Elden Ring related videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.